Naval Weapons Station. He will be talking to you about opportunities available in electronics technology and in mechanical technology. Now, the program of the weapons station is a little bit different from NASA, so please pay close attention to those differences. The major difference is Mike will be back next spring because he does his selection at the end of the second semester. Okay? In either case, with NASA or the weapons station, or even if we've got some people who later decide they want to be in the designer program, the starting date for employment is all the same. On or about May 15, which is the end of the second semester, is when you really start to work. Okay? So, Mike?
Okay. What I would like to do today is to give you just an idea of some of the positions that we anticipate at least recruiting for. Then tell you a little bit about some of the benefits of a career in the Federal Service, and then some of the regulations and requirements that we have in the Navy for the co-op program. We anticipate that we'll be recruiting for electronics mechanics, ordnance equipment mechanics, and engineering technicians. To give you an idea of the pay that you would be getting should you get into the co-op program at the Naval Weapons Station, I have the pay next to the grades up there on the board. For instance, as an electronics mechanic, you would start out at a WG3 level. That stands for wage grade at $6.86 an hour. Halfway through the program, you can be promoted to a WG4 at $7.28 an hour, and then at the end of the year, when you get your diploma, you would be brought on as a WG5 at $7.73 an hour. From that point on, promotions are up to you. As an ordnance equipment mechanic, you can go as far as the journeyman level, which is a WG8, and a WG9, which would be $9.88 an hour. Up to here, your promotions are just about guaranteed. Once you get the WG5 to go to an 8 or 10, you have to compete with other employees. But keep in mind, most of those employees have no college, and certainly few have degrees. Therefore, from Thomas Nelson, graduating from here, you certainly do have an advantage. And it's my opinion, if you didn't get a promotion, you didn't fill out your papers correctly, or you didn't interview well, you should be able to go on up. Should you get into the ordnance or the electronics mechanic area, it's the same way. You come in as a WG3, you get your 4, you come into civil service as a full-fledged, full-time employee at the WG5, but in the electronics side of the house, the journeyman level goes clear up to a WG12, which is $10.77 an hour. Now, what happens to you then? Suppose you did come in and you went up to a WG10 or a WG12. What happens to you then? You can go and become a foreman and make even more money, or you could go into the engineering technician side of the house and go on up in the GS or the white-collar scale. Just to give you an idea, a GS9, I have the hourly pay now is $11.43 an hour, which would be a typical grade for journeyman level in that area. Another thing you can go into is the engineering technician series to begin with, and that starts at the GS3, and you do not get any other promotions. At the end of the year, you go to a GS4, which is $6.74 an hour. Now, you've got your degree, you're a GS4 engineering technician. After 1 year, you can qualify for GS5 at $7.54 an hour. Normally, people who come into civil service for a GS5 position out of a co-op program have a 4-year college degree. But you gain that additional experience equal to that on the job working. So you can see the benefits are there. One of the good things about the federal government, and especially the Navy in this area, is that you do not have to stay in the job you are in. For example, if you see something better, you can apply for that position and possibly get it. You're not locked in. Once that you're brought into civil service as a full-fledged employee, you're free to compete with other employees for any jobs anywhere. It is difficult to go out, for example, from a Navy position and get a job at Fort Eustis. It's done, but it's difficult. It's much easier to go from a Navy job at one location to a Navy job at another location. This is because when they announce the positions, they'll make them open. That is, the people who can apply for that position may be typically all naval employees, Hampton Roads commuting area. So you're not locked in. That is one of the benefits. You can even go to San Diego or even overseas on these promotions and announcements. That's a very good point, and this is certainly a Navy area, so the job pool available to you is quite large. Another thing that's good about the federal government is that you have a lot of benefits, and I'm going to get into some of those in a little while, but you have stability. You're a full-fledged career conditional employee. That's what you will be at the end of that first year. 2 years later, you become a full-fledged career employee. Someone can't say, well, I don't like you, don't come back to work next week. It doesn't operate that way. Once you're in the federal government, there are safeguards, and you do have job stability. You really don't have to worry about your job unless they close a base where you're working, they have a RIF or something like that. A RIF, incidentally, is a reduction in force. And the chances of that are not all that good, especially in the career fields in which you would be entering. We have these co-op programs with Thomas Nelson because we need employees, not because we have extra employees and want to get rid of them. So basically, I've covered the career progression, the pay that's available. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Naval Weapons Station itself. We have about 13,000 acres, and we have a large number of civilian employees, well over 1,600 Naval Weapons Station employees, not counting our tenant activities. So we do have a large number of employees there. Because you're going into a job that has the word mechanic in it, don't make the mistake of thinking of the old classical auto mechanic covered in grease. It is not that kind of a job. You'll be working in an extremely clean, white coat type environment, predominantly working on missiles, checking out the electronic components of missiles or the mechanical components of missiles. You'll use a lot of highly sophisticated electronics gear. Very sophisticated. A lot of money has been invested in this, and you'll be working on some very sophisticated missile systems. And I hope when we come out here in the spring that we will be able to give you a better idea of those missiles, at least what we can tell you, and what they do and what you would be doing in a little bit more detail. Now, how do you get in and what are the requirements? We're part of the Department of Defense. So we have our Department of Defense requirements, we have our Navy requirements, we have the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, requirements. There's several ways you can get into the federal government. You can have served in Vietnam, and I don't think there's anyone in here who's old enough, except a couple of us, to have served in Vietnam. That's one way you can get a Veterans Readjustment appointment, and you can be hired directly in. Another way is you can wait until they're recruiting somewhere in this area, and you can go over to the Office of Personnel Management in Norfolk, and you can compete with all the other employees who are looking for jobs in the federal government. And there are a tremendous number. Every time they get a vacancy, it's overwhelming, the number of people who are applying, many of them with four-year college degrees. It is not easy to get in. If you have, for example, a four-year degree in chemical engineering, it's easy to get in. If you have some very technical, highly specialized jobs, it's easy to get in or experience. Computer area is pretty good. But for you, there is one other way to get in, and that is the co-op program. And that, I think, is the biggest benefit of all. The world's your oyster. It's waiting for you. All you have to do is get selected, and we have We had extra vacancies we couldn't fill last time. So once you're in, all you have to do is do your job, do it well, don't get in trouble, and you can go right on up the ladder. Also, as far as education is concerned, there's a regulation that says that once you're a federal employee, unless it's a special program, I'll be honest with you, we cannot train you to get a degree. But if you become a technician or get into some of these technical areas, you can go to a college course and we can pay for it, provided that college course meets a requirement for a knowledge, skill excuse me, or ability you will be using on the job. So it is possible to get college after-hours courses and have those courses paid for by the federal government. I'll give you a good example. I'm in the training business. If I wanted to take a course that had something to do with classroom procedures or latest teaching techniques or something like that, I could take that course and the Navy could pay for it. If I want to take a course in Astronomy 101 or something, I have a real problem. I'm going to have to pay for that one myself. And there are people who have gotten a considerable number of college credits in technical positions. We do have requirements. I know Thomas Nelson has requirements that they must follow, and we have our requirements. And I want to just run through those for a few minutes. You must be a full-time student. That's one of them. You must be enrolled, of course, in the Thomas Nelson Community College co-op program and be recommended by Thomas Nelson Community College. You must be a U.S. citizen. You don't have to be born here. You can be naturalized, but you must be a U.S. citizen. You will have to probably pass some type of physical examination. Those usually are not all that involved, but it is required. You must keep in mind that you will be working with highly technical equipment. You must be in good physical condition to work on it. You cannot have a parent, military, or civilian working for the Navy. I don't know, is there anyone in here who has that? Okay, that is a requirement. That doesn't mean you definitely can't get hired, but there are certain conditions when you could still be hired. But that is one of the limitations, okay? And if you do have a parent working for the Navy, each case is analyzed on an individual basis. And that is done by the Navy. Okay. Yes. Right. So that is there are a few limitations, or excuse me, there are a few examples where you could still be hired. But those would have to be analyzed by our staffing specialists.
What's the reason behind that?
Well, the reason goes back quite a few years because I'll tell you why. Every time there's a scandal or something is wrong, they make a regulation so it won't happen again. What they felt was happening or might happen is, for example, I get to be at a high level in the Navy, and I have 3 sons, and I want them to have Navy jobs, and I'm a biggity-big in the Navy, a GS-14, okay, at a high level. So I can use my influence and have my sons hired while somebody else who's janitor in the Navy can't do anything. You see, that's the reason. What ends up is people who have parents who are in the Navy go to work for the Army or NASA or the Air Force or some other co-op program with some other department in the federal government. That's the rationale behind that. It's a protective measure to keep people from hiring their children. Because if I'm in the Navy, then I can hire my children. I think you can see that. So there's a problem. Now, if I'm working for the Navy, and then I go over to the Army and I have 3 children, they can co-op with the Navy at the point that I leave the Navy and go to the Army. Okay. So that's the rationale behind that. You must be also eligible for any security clearance that's required. A lot of the positions require a secret clearance. And you must be a high school graduate or equivalency, such as a high school GED. Another thing that's come out is drugs, or drugs in the workplace. We're very safety conscious. I don't want anyone in here to have the idea that because it's a naval weapons station that everything is going to blow up out there and blow you away with it. That is not true. The safety precautions out there are incredible. I don't even work with weapons. They're so strict that I cannot have a beer during my lunchtime. No naval weapons station employees can drink any alcoholic beverages during duty hours. The reason being, would you want someone who's had 3 or 4 beers working on weapons systems in this area or explosives? Same with drugs. That's another no-no because it can get you into trouble and it's a danger not only to yourself but to your fellow employees. You cannot even smoke a cigarette in a moving vehicle. If you're working around gunpowder, you can't wear regular shoes. No polyester. You have to wear just cotton because of the idea of static electricity. Everything is safe and very controlled. Very controlled. About getting into the station is very controlled too. So we watch out from a safety and a security standpoint so you can feel safe working out there. You will be in a safe environment and you will also be in a very clean environment. Very clean. Indoors, good working conditions. Another thing that we have is once you get your degree, we have to convert you within 120 days from the date you graduate from Thomas Nelson. And like I said, you would be converted at a WG5 or at the GS4. So we have to pick you up as a full-time college student or employee within 120 days. Another thing you must do is you must maintain academic standards so as to receive a degree at the end of the year. You must be able to get your degree. You will also work half-time Monday through Friday, and that would be from 7:30 to 11:30. And then you, of course, go to college in the afternoon. Your pay, as I have pointed out already, you get the same pay as any other civil service employee holding the same grade. So you make the same money as a WG4. You make the same money as any other WG4. There's no discrimination on the pay whatsoever. Another thing we do is once you are picked up, we make out a training plan for you to cover the year. You will have possibly some in-house formal training, depending on the position you're in. You will have a lot of OJT. You'll be working with someone, almost like a mentor. You'll be working with someone. They will be showing you the regulations and teaching you safety, all the safety requirements. And they will go through the various procedures with you, check you out on the equipment and everything else. Some of the benefits you'll have benefits like any other civil service employee. You're under the Federal Employees Retirement System. That's FERS, F-E-R-S, Federal Employees Retirement System. That's a 3-tiered system. You get a Social Security time for that. You get credit for your Social Security. You also have a thrift savings plan where you can invest money and the government will match that. And you have your basic FERS annuity, which is 1%, I believe, per year of service. Excellent retirement benefits. I've got 35 years total federal service. I even get credit. You even get credit when you retire for your unused sick leave, which in my case is worth 7 months' time. The longer you're in and the higher grades you have, the more your retirement. And if I retire at the end of next year, I can retire now. But if I retire at the end of next year, I will be retiring at $25,000 a year. And that's a lot of money for retirement. And if you stick with it long enough, the benefits are there. I don't know of all that many companies or private industrial corporations or what have you that have those type of benefits. Another thing is you get all your holidays off with full pay. So if it's Labor Day or whatever, you draw full pay for that day. And you also get sick and annual leave credits. A new employee normally gets 4 hours annual leave credit per 2 weeks' work. Since you'll be working half-time, you'll be getting 2 hours credit per 2 weeks' work. Same is true of sick leave. You get 4 hours sick leave for every 2 weeks' work. You will be getting 2 hours sick leave for every 2 weeks' work. So suppose you start working and along comes fall or December and you catch a cold and you have to be out for 4 hours and you have 4 hours sick leave, you draw full pay for those 4 hours, just like any other civil service employee. Performance appraisals. There are appraisal forms that are sent by Thomas Nelson Community College, and those will be filled out by your supervisor and returned to Thomas Nelson Community College. You will be placed under performance standards just like any other civil service employee, and you'll be treated the same as any other civil service employee in your performance ratings. Normally we have a one halfway, like you have one every year at 6 months. They give you a midterm and your final appraisal at the end of the year. There's nothing earth-shaking about your performance appraisals. You should have absolutely no problems whatsoever. Most people who have problems in the federal government, it's either they don't like working, they don't come to work on time, disciplinary type problems is what we usually have. With your background, you should come out extremely well on your performance appraisals. You can apply for any jobs that are open out there once you're a full-fledged employee. You just have to qualify like any other employee, and you can go right on up the career ladder. I started out as a GS5. I'm now GS11. I've tried to make 12 a few times, but I didn't get selected. But the point is that I had the right to apply. A few 12s, GS12s I didn't want, but I had the right to apply. Equal employment opportunity is the word out there. There's no discrimination based on physical handicap, unless there's a physical handicap that would keep you from doing the job, something like that. Race, creed, national origin, whether you're a male or female, that does not matter. It's your ability to do the work and how well you do it that matters. And we have an Equal Employment Opportunity Office that oversees that program. Once that you graduate from Thomas Nelson, to be picked up, you must, of course, meet all the requirements for an associate degree. And you must meet all the qualification standards for the position in which you will be hiring. And since we designed the co-op program to do that automatically, there will be no problem whatsoever. And you must complete before graduation 1 or more work periods totaling 26 weeks or 1,040 hours. And once again, Mr. Phillips guarantees that in the schedule, and we look at it also and make sure that we meet that requirement. And as I mentioned earlier, you must be converted by the 120th day after graduation, and they're ready to pick you up as soon as you graduate, so that's no problem. Another thing is, you must be recommended by your supervisor, the person that you are working for. So that, in a nutshell, I hope, is the co-op program that we have with Thomas Nelson. Like I said, I think it's an outstanding program. The big benefit is, if you're interested in the federal government and some stability and working for a company, if you will, and I put that in quotes, that you have equal opportunity, you can move ahead, you can file for promotions all over any other activities that open the promotions to you, this is the place to go. It's not the kind of a job where you're told that your position is being abolished and don't come to work Monday. It isn't that sort of a thing. Or you get a supervisor who doesn't like you and they get rid of you. It isn't that type of thing at all. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a safe, good place to work. I've been there 14 years. Nothing really serious has happened since I've been there. Okay? I think I just almost made it. All right?
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Tackett at this point in time? Mike, we want to thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For taking time on a late Friday afternoon to come out and be with us. Let's give Mike a hand. One thing that I would like to bring your attention, I think we have 10 co-op students, about 30 some at said in the introductory, select based on what you think at this point in time you really want to do. Okay? And I can almost guarantee you that you will be pleased with the work environment and the type of work that you're doing. One other thing, how many mechanical technology people do we have in here at this point in time? Okay, those of you who are mechanical, you might realize that mechanical technology and drafting and design technology for the first 3 semesters are basically identical in terms of courses that you have selected to take and are required to take for graduation. So if you would like to also